Welcome to Your Digital Reputation. Here's your host, Roger Christie.
Hello, and thanks for joining us. My name's Roger Christie, founder of social media advisory firm Propel, and host of the Your Digital Reputation podcast, where we talk to industry leaders about how they get social media right in the moments that matter. And today's topic is, frankly, a life-changing one. To help set the scene, I want to put you in the shoes of my guest today who's sitting across the table from me. Imagine making the decision to move to another country, to convince your family that there are new opportunities in another part of the world, to get their buy-in despite leaving friends, family, and familiarities behind, and then to go through the complex and often frustrating process of moving your whole life into the unknown. Imagine the pressure, the responsibility to make it all work for them. Now imagine if things didn't go the way you'd planned and that work was hard to come by. Imagine if you felt stuck. What would you do? What would help you in this moment that really matters? And how might social media play a role? This is the situation faced, the real story of Aniisu Verghese, who migrated from India to Australia at the end of 2023. He's someone I've come to know, respect, and admire for many more reasons than one. And he's been kind enough to come on the show today and share his story with you. Aniisu, welcome to the Your Digital Reputation podcast.
Thank you for having me, Roger.
It's an absolute pleasure. And it's crazy to think that it was 18 months ago that we first met. And we want to go back there, and I want to tell your story right from the beginning, even before you came to Australia too. But before we get into that, just right off the top, I'm very grateful that you've come in to chat about this topic today, because I appreciate this is a problem you're still solving. It's a problem you're working through, and something that I've got no doubt it fills your every day. And it's something that is a challenge every day. But this episode isn't about setting up as a victim of a system. It's not about pointing fingers or blaming anyone or anything. This is a really tough market that a lot of people find themselves in. Everyone finds themselves in. And I think you'd also be the first to say that there are still things that you could have done differently, and things that you could still do to improve your chances in this new market. And I'm sure you're going to share some of those in this chat. But instead, this episode is about exploring how social media can be a powerful force for good, a way that it can be a resource to communicate your value, a way to meet and build relationships with vital connections in this new market. And your experiences, your learnings, and your reflections from what I'm sure is a roller coaster 18 months. We're going to get into some of those today. So with that in mind, perhaps the easiest place to start is just to tell people a little bit about yourself and your background. If you can just share maybe the summary of Aniisu in terms of your work and professional history.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Roger. I'm a change and comms professional, and I've worked in India, in Poland, the UK, and now in Australia. Like you said, I moved over in 2023, and my background is in advertising. I started my career in advertising. Then I found my calling in employee communications at a time when people told me I was making a mistake. PR was more lucrative. It was more visible. You make a lot of money. But I stuck to my guns. I was quite passionate about employee comms because I love working with people, like to solve problems. I listen to people a lot, and I feel that there's a huge opportunity for organizations to tap into that potential. Along the way, I've authored 3 books. I've also earned a PhD in HR and organization behavior. I hold a ProSci change management certification, and I also been a teacher. I've been teaching at a management institute in Sydney. I'm a 3rd generation teacher. My grandfather and my mother were also teachers back in India. So yeah, that's a quick summary about who I am and what I do.
I love that, and you've listed off so many things that if I didn't know you as a person, I'd probably feel a little bit intimidated by sitting across the table from you in terms of your credentials and achievements, and not 1, but 3 books that you've authored. But the other thing you forgot to mention, and one of the other reasons why I know you, is through the IOBC, and the fact that you were the IOBC Regional Communicator of the Year just a couple of years ago. So there's a shopping list of activities and credentials there. But I like the fact that you mentioned you're a good listener and a humble guy too. And for what it's worth, when I first started in PR, I heard very similar feedback about advertising in PR. You're making a bad choice. It was a very similar conversation that I had back in the day. But you also mentioned there you've been around the globe. You've worked in different markets. Can you give us and give our listeners a sense of the sorts of projects you've worked on and organizations you've worked with?
Absolutely. So I worked with Tesco, which is one of the world's largest retailers and one of the biggest in the UK. And I was based in India, but I did have the opportunity to also work in the UK with the global communications team. And during that time, one of the biggest initiatives that I led and I am very proud of is the fact that we created a storytelling platform for the entire company. This is the first time the company was thinking about creating a platform like that, and I kind of initiated it. And the platform was, tapped into by almost 450,000 employees across the globe.
Wow.
And that's the kind of scale which I impacted. Likewise, at Sabre Travel Technologies, which is again a travel tech firm based out of the US, but it has delivery centers across the globe. My role was to help them rebuild their tarnished reputation in the market. Again, they were going through a lot of challenges, and one of the ownership that I took up was to make sure that the employer brand was rebuilt in the market, because people were not willing to consider the company as an employer of choice. And at BlueScope Steel in Australia, where I did a 4-month contract with them. Again, interesting exercise and a campaign where we rolled out their global listening strategy, and it was never done before since COVID. And so there was absolutely nothing to rely on. So I had to kind of go in almost blind to put together materials, work with senior stakeholders, and then create and deliver a project which cut across 10 different locations, 16,000 employees. So I'm really, really proud about some of these pieces of work that I did.
So what you've just listed there is you've worked with some very well-known organizations across a wide range of disciplines in communications and change management and HR, as well as you were saying. So you've worked on some pretty meaty and complex and exciting and innovative challenges. And I'm capturing all that against the backdrop of what you shared earlier about the shopping list of credentials that you've got and the different achievements, the awards, the PhD, the books, and those sorts of things. I'm interested to know, when you've come into this market and are looking for work here, have those credentials and experiences been a help or a hindrance?
Well, to be honest, Roger, I feel that in some countries where I work, like in India and Poland and the UK, such credentials would be welcomed and they would be seen as a help. But I feel that in Australia, it probably comes across as a hindrance, and there could be multiple reasons. So, for example, I feel it's also ironic that sometimes I need to downplay my credentials and my skills, and I don't really talk about my PhD or some of the work that I do, because I do come across as overqualified or even over the age, and therefore that puts me out of the job market, so to speak. I also feel at times people who come to this market feel pressurized that they need to conform to certain ways which the market expects them to do. For example, take up any job that comes your way. It could be, stocking shelves or driving Ubers or, cleaning the hotels or waiting at tables, which are perfectly fine. And I think those are great jobs to do. But it's also important to understand that when you do such jobs, and especially when you have certain experience and expertise, it also then moves away the focus from what you really want to, from your goals, and it kind of reduces the amount of time that you get to really invest in areas that you will really want to focus on. So I feel that, yes, there are certain situations which people need to consider, and you need to really think about how you navigate the market in ways that matter. So I think, that's...
So something that, as you're talking through that, and I can feel that tension. I can feel the tension between your background, your experience, the work that you've done, the value that would bring to an organization. And I can also feel the tension of that against coming into a new market and needing to, and I'm changing your words slightly here, but needing to adjust the way that you present those credentials and maybe adapt the way that they're shared to fit with the market expectations. I'm interested, as part of that, what we're here talking about and what we do talk about on this show is the role that social media plays to help you get things right in the moments that matter. In your case, and in the case of the conversation we're having, it really is around helping you find a role in a new market. What role does social media play in giving you the context and the nuance and the kind of the backdrop, if you will, that helps you to take what is experience, credentials, and all those things, those wonderful assets that you have, and appropriate them for this market? What role does social media play in helping you attune and prime your assets for this market?
No, I think absolutely. I think social media plays a huge role, and I think it's very, very valuable and important. But I must be very honest that I haven't really done much with social media. Yes, I've been an active advocate of digital media, been a blogger since 2006, and have been posting quite frequently on LinkedIn. But posting isn't enough. You also need to comment, and you also need to network, and you need to engage more actively on social media, and which I think I have. I probably need to do a lot more. That said, I think that there are ways in which, and I think I've seen a lot of the work that you are doing, and I think there's immense value from what you post. And I think I've been following your work, and I believe that I think I can learn a lot more from what you are already doing, and I think that's the way forward for me as well. And especially someone like me who's come from a collectivist, kind of a culture where you feel that you should not be tom-tomming about yourself, and you shouldn't be boasting about your expertise and skills. When you come to a culture in the Western world where it's okay to really be speaking about your authentic self and putting yourself out there and being in front of people, I think that's a completely different mindset shift which is required, and I think that's the journey that I'm on, and I think I need to do a lot more from a social media context.
I think that's a really good call out. And it's funny, isn't it? Because when I talk to people in different markets around the world, Australia is not seen as progressive. It is not seen as leading the charge in terms of telling your own story, controlling your own narrative. And it's not even about tooting your own horn necessarily and kind of pumping up your own tires. It's not about overinflating. It's simply about being factual and simply about knowing that if you're not sharing your story, if you're not telling your own story in your words, then no one is. And so therefore you're not visible and you're not being heard. So even being a visible participant, that's a step. And I don't think that the vast majority of Australians are doing that. And certainly if I compare us, say, to our North American friends, that's where I most commonly hear there's no reluctance in other markets to tell your own story and to use that to help you get ahead. But it's such a good call out in your context because you're coming from a collectivist society, as you said, and coming from a place like India where you aren't the hero. And nor would I say any of us here are the heroes. We're all participants in a story in one way or another. But if that's your background, and yet you need to stand out and be visible in a new market to get cut through, suddenly you're at a disadvantage. So how do you, and I'm also sorry, before I go on, I should also say, I think you're being a bit humble in terms of the amount of effort you put in. Because if we know that there are, a billion odd LinkedIn users around the world, I'd argue you've probably done more than the average user on LinkedIn over the years. So you can say that you haven't done enough. I'm not saying there's things you can't do, but certainly you're probably doing more than the average user. With your culture and your context, and with your commercial need and imperative to find a role, how do you balance that tension then? How can you use social media in a way that is respectful and authentic to your culture while also addressing what is obviously a commercial need right now?
Yeah, it's obviously been a journey, and it's been hard for me to think about the right steps I should take. And I think the way we met, I think that itself is a great example and a story of how social media works, and the fact that we've been connected through a common friend, Jonas in Denmark. And, so that's the way we got connected before I moved over. So I think a few steps that I've taken, and I've done it more deliberately and intentionally. So I've been part of the IBC. So that's one network and channel that I have reached out to when I landed. And the other one is the India-Australia Business Chamber. And so again, I went for their networking event, met people in person, but of course the networking happened because of social media, and the word got around because of it. I've also been, volunteering locally with a couple of charities to get my understanding of the local culture, being able to give back to the community in ways that matter. And so that's one aspect that I looked at. I've also, created a forum in Australia for immigrants like me who overseas communication professionals who come to Australia and New Zealand, and they struggle to understand the market or understand the dynamics. So with a few like-minded professionals and people, so I've created a forum where it's like a safe space for people to talk about their challenges and issues, and we try to bring people from outside, career coaches and counselors and others who can talk to them and give them advice and guidance. And so there have been a few of these examples that I have, steps that I've taken, and I think there is a lot more which can be done, of course. Like, for example, I'm currently teaching at a management institute. It also gives me a good perspective of what is expected in the local market, and students who come to the class are from various countries and different diverse backgrounds, and so that also opens my mind to what is required and what can be done. So I'm in that journey, but of course, social media is the anchor and the vehicle through which I get to know of these opportunities. Lastly, I like to also call out, even when it comes to mentoring, there have been a few fantastic mentors that I have been in touch with. Zora Artis from IBC, Ross Monahan, Daniel Bond, and Adrian Cropley. So there have been a lot of them who have gone out of the way to give me good advice and give me, point me to the right people and, connect me. And everything happened obviously through social media. So yes, I think there are great positives of being socially connected and also to leverage the network.
I love that. And I love that it sounds like, as you're talking through it there, it just sounds like it's BAU. It's so interesting that you called yourself out and said that you haven't done a lot through social media, yet as you rattled off that list, you said the starting point for all those things was social media. So it feels like the networking side of it is driven by that network that you've created. And I love that you called out Jonas too. I love that a Danish person connected an Indian and an Australian over LinkedIn. It's just, that's how the world works today. And that is the reason why we met. And I think that it feels, the way I'm hearing you talk about it, that it is almost part of your social infrastructure. These digital technologies that you can use to identify people like the wonderful people you just mentioned in this country and who have given you mentorship and advice and counsel along the way. You've used that infrastructure as a way to reach out and connect with people. And through those people, been presented opportunities. It's not the be-all and end-all. LinkedIn is not the be-all and end-all. It's not the solution, the answer to all our problems. It's simply a mechanism by which we can access people and opportunities we otherwise couldn't. There's something else that you mentioned in there, though, that I'd like to pick out. We often see that very direct link between, I am coming from, in your case, I'm coming from India, I'm coming from a different market, and I'm moving to Australia. And so I intentionally identify and seek out people and try to connect and build relationships ahead of time. That's a very obvious use case for social media, but one that's hidden there. You talked about the importance of the local culture and the context and the nuance of a new market. I'm interested to know what role, if any, has social media played in helping you understand the way Australia operates, whether it's through these people that you've mentioned or whether it's just, through the news cycle and using a social media feed as a bit of a news and information source.
No, absolutely. I think it plays a huge role. And I think firstly, it's about listening. If you are reading, watching the news and interacting with people, understanding what's going on out there, I think you can pick up a lot of the nuances. The other aspect, of course, is, how do you kind of make sure that you are engaging, understanding the culture in a way that is really important and makes sense for the workplace and workforce. And one of the things which I did, and I'm glad a friend of ours who reached out and connected us to the Australian Museum and said that, it might be a good opportunity to kind of go and understand the history and background that might give you a deeper insight about Australia and the culture. And we did that. And I think that also opened my eyes to a different perspective of Australia. And I've also been actively involved with the local Blacktown Library to pick up books and magazines and to read about it. But I do believe that, yes, there are ways in which people can use social media, A, by listening, B, by engaging, reaching out, building those forums, connecting with people on the ground, and also, just sharing their stories about who they are and what their perspectives are, because sometimes you really don't understand till people share their journey and their stories. So I think that's crucial. The other angle which I wanted to, in fact, interesting that you brought out, because in Australia, you're expected to be very specific about your job, right? If you are applying for a particular role, you need to literally narrow down what you have done in that particular space. And that sometimes, even when you put yourself on social media, you need to clearly call out that this is the one area that you are a specialist in.
At the expense of all others.
At the expense of. Now, what I've realized is that sometimes when you come from a country like India, where you have done a diverse range of work, sometimes you got to just, skim everything else and kind of focus on one thing. But what I discovered was one of the stories which I thought would be relevant is, for example, the road safety charity and the work that I've done in India on corporate social responsibility. In fact, while I was at Tesco, while I was doing comms, I also managed the CSR, the corporate social responsibility portfolio, which meant that I was responsible for fundraising, for engaging charities, for employee volunteering, for all of that. And that piece of work is something which I completely downplayed when I came to Australia. And while I was talking to one of the consultants who looks into the impact of the charity space, and she said, look, you've done so much in that space, no one really knows, and unless you surface that. And so she asked me to redo my CV in such a way that I brought all that out again. Because I was just talking about change and comms and nothing else, or in fact, just change or just comms. And when I started saying that, hey, I've done this bit, she said that should definitely be in, because you raised 10,000 Australian dollars worth of funds, which is huge compared to what people do here. So that is the kind of story which I thought would be relevant for people who come from abroad, from overseas, thinking that, hey, you got to downplay everything else because the job expects you to just do one piece of the 5 other elements that may be important to the organization, and don't just talk about anything else but just that. But at some point, if you don't really highlight some of those, be it on social media elsewhere, people don't get to know of it. So yeah, I think that would be an angle.
So there's a really interesting insight as I'm hearing you talk about all this stuff. And it is that as you're going through your planning to come to Australia, the desire to find a role that was relevant and kind of made best use of your skills and your assets in this market, and the challenges that you've had to date in trying to do so. What's interesting there is that it feels to me like social media is being used as an opportunity to build relationships with the right relevant people and some of the wonderful names and people that you've just listed before, and as a way to showcase your technical expertise, your competence, your credentials, the things that sit on your CV in a social media environment, your LinkedIn profile, that sort of stuff. And I'm interested because I feel like there's an opportunity here, which is something perhaps worth exploring. This idea that if we put all those technical credentials to a side for a moment, there are things that transcend boundaries. There are things that transcend borders that are points of commonality and connection with people in completely different parts of the world. It's the same reason why I can have conversations with people in Canada or Denmark, shout out to Jonas again, about shared areas of interest, not about technical competency, but about things that we care about and things that we're interested in, and we learn from one another across completely different parts of the world. So I'm interested to know, are there things in your story, Aniisu, that are not technical of nature, but they're actually more about your passions, your values, the things that make you who you are, the things that people know you for, that cut across borders? And they're stories that resonate with people in this market as much as they would resonate with people in Poland or people in the UK. And maybe one of those stories, and I'm just guessing, speculating here, maybe one of those stories is why you chose to come to Australia in the first place. Have you shared any of those stories on LinkedIn?
Well, I haven't, but I think it's important to kind of talk about it now because I'm here, and also the fact that when it's not that I suddenly decided to show up in Australia. It was a deliberate decision, and it's been on my mind for a long time. In fact, my association with Australia goes back to 2015 when I was invited to speak at a internal comms conference in Melbourne. And also conduct a workshop, and which I enjoyed completely. And I realized that there was a huge potential and lots of opportunities in Australia for internal communications, an area which I'm passionate about. And I felt that I could learn a lot more, I could contribute a lot more if I came to this market. But it's not that I chose this country, straight away. I mean, I had options to also think about the US, where there was an opportunity to move through my company. But I decided not to go there because, again, I was not very comfortable with the culture, especially in schools, and the gun culture that we hear of, and that's something which made me realize that probably it's not a very safe place to bring up children. But nevertheless, I also had an opportunity to think about Singapore as a market, the UK as a market. But I did finally end up thinking of Australia because it's a great place to live. It also has great opportunities. It gives you a lot more avenues to get better with who you are and what you do. And I think those are some of the drivers which made us kind of think of choose Australia as the country to live in.
So opportunities for you, opportunities for your family.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to know then, again, as we explore this idea of what are the stories that cut across boundaries. You said you haven't shared those stories.
Right. So in 2002, I had a bad bike accident, and my left arm is split into multiple pieces. The metal plates are still in.
Oh, wow.
There are still some 18 screws in it. I haven't removed it with the surgery, though. I've kept it on. But the fact is that when I went through that accident and when I recovered, I realized, and those days in India, and it still is, road safety is not considered important part, as in it, there were a lot of road accidents which keep happening. And I thought it was an opportunity for me to educate people, especially youngsters, about safe driving. Thankfully, that day when I was driving, I was wearing my helmet and I was safe because of it. And I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of go back and help people understand the value of wearing helmets, wearing seatbelts, safe driving on the roads. And so what I did was, once I recovered, I kind of gathered some friends and I said, why don't we think about doing some kind of campaigning? And the idea was to just put together some material which would be shared with college students and with organizations and, just spread the word. But it slowly grew into a movement. In fact, a lot of people started recognizing the work that was being done. And we created a kit which had posters, it had materials which was distributed not just in India but globally. In fact, a lot of countries reached out for the material that we are using. And interestingly, the World Health Organization saw the work I was doing, and they invited me to Geneva to partner with them for World Health Day, which happened in 2004. And they wanted me to be the representative to do the campaigning in India. And so that's how I kind of got involved with injury prevention and road safety. And it was an interesting time because I also sent out conference posters, and one of them was to Australia and got accepted, although I couldn't travel that time. But nevertheless, it gave me the opportunity to understand that, yes, the work that we were doing was valued and people were seeing it. And we partnered with the police, with the government officials, with medical professionals, and made sure that the message was out there and we were able to measure the impact of what we were doing. So I think that is a story which I thought it would be of relevance because it cuts across age generations and also geographies.
That is a remarkable story. And actually, what I find most amusing about that story is the fact that you've just talked to me about different safety considerations, yet at the same time you're riding a motorcycle in India. So that's on you. I'll let you own that one. And I could only imagine the conversations you have with your family about the safety profile of motorcycling in India. You wouldn't catch me riding a bike in the streets of Sydney. But it is interesting. And I think what I love about that story is that this is obviously a passion of yours, it's something of yours, whether we're talking about motorbikes or whether we're talking about road safety here. This is a story that makes up you. makes you who you are. And I imagine there are plenty of people in this market who have had a similar road safety, road trauma experience, or people who have a real passion for motorsports, whatever it might be. These are opportunities to connect away from the technical aspects of our role. These are ways to form connections with people where we're not being compared based on a sheet of technical credentials. And I do think these are wonderful opportunities, not just to bring our whole selves into our corporate persona, our professional persona, but actually to connect with people on a much deeper level. And that's counsel I'm not giving to you, this counsel I would give to anyone, right, is to bring more of yourself to this environment, because it's through those stories that make you who you are and what you stand for that we often find our best allies, right, and when we often ultimately find new opportunities. And perhaps that's a nice little segue here to what happens next. So given that you are still looking for that permanent role and that opportunity that reflects the depth of experience that you have, Aniisu, what is next for you? What do you think you'll do next off the back of this conversation?
Well, as you rightly pointed out, I am looking for my next assignment, but again, I'm looking at ways in which I can add value to organizations where they require my expertise on these domains, be it change, be it communications, be it even corporate social responsibility. And I think it's, I see a lot of opportunities where organizations grapple with employee engagement, employee experience issues. There are multinationals here who have operations overseas, who have diverse workforces. They're just not able to understand how to sustain some of the engagement that they have. And so I think those are some of the ways where I could kind of come in and support some of these organizations, think through some of the challenges, the change, the way they go about executing and implementing some of their programs. So I think that's really what I'm looking at. But of course, I'm open to any other avenues and ways in which I can engage, either as a consultant or in-house. So yeah,
you have almost like this web of experience and expertise that I can just, as you're talking it through, all these interconnected aspects of your life, from the World Health Organization and the things that happened 20 years ago, right, to your experience here in Australia 10 years ago, in Melbourne, and presenting there, and the experience through the books that you've written and your PhD. You've got this just interconnected web of expertise that, as I say, I just think is such an asset for any organization. But if I can again step out and try and broaden this to people listening, and maybe my final question today is, as you step back and you reflect on the journey that you've had and the things you have done, as you said, the things that you haven't done that you should ideally do more of moving forward, what would your advice be? What perhaps 2 or 3 things that you would do differently to help you find that permanent role sooner that others can learn from too?
Right. I think I would probably use social media a lot more actively and engage better, because I think just posting isn't enough. I think I would probably need to leverage it in ways where I could understand the network better or tap into the right people, build those connections more strongly. I would do that. The other is, I think, putting myself in front of people and making sure that they understand, because I've also received feedback that sometimes my name comes across as non-Aussie, and therefore, sometimes people, my CV probably lands at the bottom of the pile because, I don't sound very Australian. And some people have told me to change my name, which I don't plan to right now. But
before you get to your next point, I think we should, and I'm not encouraging this campaign, but it would be an interesting experiment to change your name to Andrew V. So you may not know this, but there is a somewhat famous Australian media personality who changed his name to Andrew G when he came into this market for the purposes of assimilation and being, loved and whatever by the Australian population. I think it's ridiculous, and he has since changed his name back, but I find it ridiculous that people ask you to change your name. Aniisu is who you are. And I think we need to respect that diversity and embrace that diversity for the benefits that it brings, rather than trying to normalize it here in this culture. What does it mean anyway? There may be more Aniisus than Andrews here. I don't even know. So anyway, looking past that point.
I would think that also I probably need to adapt my LinkedIn profile to be more Australian, so that it resonates better. It kind of appeals to the right audiences, people who can help me open the doors to opportunities. I think that would be another way I would look at it.
Yeah, I think there's a balance there too, don't you, Aniisu, in terms of making your profile appear or present more Australian. Maybe it's accentuating the things that will resonate in this market while retaining the value and the substance of the things that make you who you are.
That's a good point. Yeah, I agree.
And I hope that for you, in terms of the individuals, but also the organization that you ultimately do find yourself in, that it embraces you and the things that you have brought and the things that you have learned along your career journey in its four walls, rather than trying to get you to conform to something that you're not, and essentially diluting the value that they're getting. Because as I read your CV and as I talk to you across several coffees and chai lattes and across the table now in this podcast conversation, there are so many things that you bring to the conversations we have and a perspective that I value, that I've no doubt you would bring to other organizations. And as I said right at the start, I'm very grateful for you sharing your story, because I appreciate it is an evolving and a dynamic one. I appreciate you don't have the answers to the questions, as many of our guests do, by the way. And that's why I love this format and this environment. And I can only imagine the ups and downs that you've had to navigate and probably likely will continue to navigate over your time here. But I love that it is centered on family and it is centered on a very purposeful and intentional decision. And I'm backing your resilience and your patience to find that next opportunity. But obviously, if anyone is listening and has heard you speaking today, heard about your extensive background expertise and the lovely person that you are, I'm assuming the very best way for them to reach out is LinkedIn if they want to connect with you.
Yep.
Excellent. Please do. And if you've heard this story and you know someone in your network who would love to hear from Aniisu as well, share the podcast, share his details with them, find Aniisu on LinkedIn. I'm sure he'd be happy to chat about anything, including road safety and motorcycling, as we've learned today. But for me, this is a living, breathing example of using social media in those moments that matter. And I wholeheartedly encourage those listening to share this with your network and try and play a role in securing your future here in this country. Until then, Aniisu, thank you so much for sharing your story on the Your Digital Reputation podcast.
Thank you so much for having me again. Enjoyed the chat.
Thanks again for listening. If you've learned something from today's conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others. For all show notes, head to propelgroup.com.au. Thanks again for listening.